Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teachers for Teachers. I'm here with Dr. Leah. What do we have this week?
We are so excited this week. I actually met Jean Kaneko, who's joining us today. She's a master's in education, but I met her about 7 years ago when I first started with Two Bit Circus, and at that time she had something called the Exploratory. Then she went off and did a master's in education at High Tech High down in San Diego. So we will have lots to talk to her about classroom functioning, the human-centered design is really big on her radar, and there are some things that she's engaged in now that I don't know anything about yet, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about it.
I think we're going to have an amazing conversation about all things like ed tech, innovation, and just things that bring people joy when it comes to science, tech, engineering, art, and math.
Yes.
But before we get started, I do want to welcome our panelists, in addition to our guests, and just let you know who's here. Again, I'm Dr. Dejana. I'm here with Dr. Leah. We're both from the Two Bit Circus Foundation. And we also want to welcome Tim Griffin, again, from Griffin Education, an amazing science, technology, engineering, and math nonprofit education company that uses the power of music to bring STEM to life for students all over. So if you have a chance after the show, make sure you check out Griffin Ed. So happy to have you, Tim. Say hello.
So good to be here. How you guys doing today?
Very well.
Right on.
So Leah, how would you like to get this conversation started today? I'm super excited, but I don't want to monopolize the time because I do know Jean from before as well. So where should we start? I mean, there's so much to talk about.
Well, you go ahead. Let's get Jean on camera here and let her start telling us a little bit about what she's doing these days.
Hi, thank you for having me. I actually was a maker centered educator for, I don't know, maybe about a dozen years. And mostly providing after school summer camps, public events, and really promoting the idea of learning with our hands and having students of all ages to be able to do that, and doing a lot of professional development for teachers, helping them to integrate the maker tools into their curriculum and their standards. I got a bit frustrated because the exploratory was asked to do in-school programming where we were providing STEM and STEAM classes, and we discovered that the lack of time for the students and the pressure that so many teachers are under from either their school admin or their district really prevented a lot of the work that we were trying to promote. The ability to think with your hands, create with your hands, build creative confidence. It ended up being more rote and formulaic. And so I decided on a whim to go down to High Tech High in San Diego, just to kind of see how they've been doing this project-based learning work for as long as they have. And there they have a graduate school of education where they not only credential teachers, but they also provide master's degrees and other types of programming. And they started the graduate school of education because they were struggling to find teachers who were engaged in work that they themselves were passionate about, as opposed to being passionate about teaching. So they decided early on that they were going to hire musicians. They were going to hire programmers, engineers, and then have them be credentialed, as opposed to going the opposite way. And so it was an amazing program. And then I came back to Los Angeles and worked at a couple of schools for a couple of years. And then currently I am consulting with Santa Monica High School and the Santa Monica Malibu School District to integrate project-based learning and innovation and design thinking into all their programs pre-K to 12.
That is awesome. And you can see behind Dr. Figueroa is a STEAM lab. That's the maker spaces that we build in schools. I'm so happy to hear that the school district, that Malibu and Santa Monica School District are working toward this, and that they've brought you on to help with that endeavor, because I think that they are a progressive school district by nature, and they certainly have funding to be an example of this. Are there many Title I schools in that community?
There are middle schools and elementary schools. There's only 2 high schools, Malibu and Santa Monica. And it's interesting because even though they're not officially a Title I school, their community, their families are very diverse. They have everything from, like, I did not know this going into it, but they have everything from homeless children to children in foster homes to millionaires' children. So it has its own challenges in many ways, because in project-based learning and design thinking, or even making, oftentimes educators have heard the story of, like, it's for those kids who can't do school, right? It's for those kids who need something else because they're not successful in traditional school. And, we all know that it's actually much harder to think with your hands than it is to necessarily memorize something and then output it onto a test. And we ask so much more of the students and of course the teachers. So they are, but they've had to, the high school doesn't have a makerspace. They have auto shop. They're building like a $20 or $30 million innovation building just to have a makerspace. My son is actually he's the one of the first students, pioneering students in a pathway within the Santa Monica High School, which is a traditional 3,000 student high school. He's in a personalized project-based learning pathway. And they are situated on the newly named Obama campus on Lincoln Boulevard and Lincoln and Ocean Park. And there, they pretty much got the okay to start the school in April, and they opened in August. So you can imagine it was utter total chaos. And I had spent a year before that at the Geffen Academy at UCLA, being one of their founding teachers. So I had quite the experience in brand new first year schools. And there, they had $100 million from David Geffen to build makerspaces and their buildings.
That does make a big difference, doesn't it?
It was a transition, yeah. So, and because it was a brand new school and because it was a public school, they had no money for an iLab. So I basically emptied out all my storage and everything that I had, and then I purchased some other things, and I pretty much outfitted the entire iLab on my own dollar. And then started supporting the teachers there, and then it started just for interest projects, and then it got into integrating this work into their core academics, which in high school is super challenging because they really have those standards that they are those content standards that they are working towards. So we're working with them right now on trying to make that shift from content standards to competencies and skills. And, of course, working with your hands is way more engaging. And even in distance learning, it's really important for the students to be able to have that. It's an uphill battle. I feel like I have been a part of new developed schools, new, innovative schools for, closing on 15 years. And, it's like we take 5 steps forward and then 10 steps back. But at least the conversation's happening. And so right now, I'm really focused on showing them examples, because I think this has been the thing that's been missing the most, from the board to all the stakeholders, from the board to the families, the parents, even students. Students often say, yeah, I really want to work with my hands, but once they actually do that, they now think, oh my God, this is like way more work, right? Can't I just memorize something and then forget it? Right? Because now you're asking me to do all this thinking and being creative and then failing fast and failing forward, which I'm so totally not comfortable doing. And then of course we're getting 14-year-olds who've spent pre-K to 8 being told they can never fail, they can never make a mistake. Right, and then all of a sudden in 9th grade we're going, no, now we want you to fail.
I feel that so much. I feel like you are one of the innovators and pioneers in our community here in Los Angeles of bringing the importance of failing forward, working with your hands, maker innovation as a core part of education over the years. And I would love, you were talking about the students, and I would love for you to share some of the growth story that you've seen by providing this opportunity to students, because our viewers are varied. We've got teachers, we also have a lot of parents, older students, and this is a real big deal. I'm reading a book right now that's called How to Raise an Adult, and it's basically a commentary on my parenting skills and how I've grown up in a generation of parents that tell our kids that they can't fail. Like they can do everything. And what happens to them as an adult when they realize things are challenging and difficult and you do fail, and that's how you learn. So I would love for you to share some of your narrative stories on how you've seen this being really transformational in the lives of not only students, but maybe even educators. Because I think I might have been one of those educators that it really transformed the way I approached my craft and my best practices.
Same here. Great question. And same here. I am the daughter of a first-generation immigrant from Korea. I came over when I was 5 and grew up on the East Coast. So that is the ultimate tiger parent society bubble that I grew up in. You never fail, you never miss a class or a day of school, right? You get 100% attendance. And then I went to college and I just blew my entire first semester. I just was like, oh my God, like now you're actually asking me to think, but I'm really good at doing this test thing, not for real, but just for the school. And I ended up searching, for probably 10, 15, 20 years until I found the thing that I really loved and that I wanted to do. So that is really my sole focus in working with educators and also parents. And I'll share the story of my own son because this was a journey that I had to go through, to let go. And so here I am saying, let's do this type of learning. Let's get rid of grades. Let's get rid of the SATs. Let's really focus on competencies. And then in the back of my head, I still have my Asian parents basically going, but, right? And so it's a struggle. It's really hard. And I have to check myself all the time. So here's a great story for you. The personalized project-based learning program is really geared around students' interest. The idea is what are the students interested in, and then weaving in the standards into what they're interested in. Right now, because they're within a traditional school district, it is not as easy to do that as we had initially thought. So, but on one day a week, all day Wednesday, the students have something called learning to interest, and they identify an interest, and then they basically work on attaining, connecting, communicating, and working with potential mentors and potential internship sites, and then from 11th grade, they would basically go off-site and be able to go on internships for 1 or 2 school days and be getting credit for that. So my son's interest is video games. All right. And I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there who are basically nodding, right? And even though I spent 20 years producing video games and animation and special effects, and I love it personally, as a parent, I was like, oh no, you can't play video games all day long. Like, what is that? And you want to do video games for a high school project? Like, that just so totally goes against everything. So in ninth grade, I fought against it as a parent. Right, I discouraged him from actually finding that as his interest. Then the whole pandemic happened, and then over the summer, I was like, I don't know what you're gonna do because you can't go anywhere. Right, so we came up with this project where he would basically stream his video games and learn all the software required to create YouTube videos, and then learn all the coding and analyze analytics for how social media actually uses what goes viral, what doesn't go viral, right? So there was a huge amount of math and statistics and all the technology that was behind all of that. And I was telling Tim, like, I had to step out of the way. Because he was just like, don't talk to me. I know you know how to do this. I know my father works for Sony Animation and he knows he uses all the software professionally, but don't come near me. I'm going to learn on my own. And so then fall started and he decided that he was going to declare his official school credited interest project to be, how can I make money using social media online? And what the students start with a ILP, which is a learning plan, an individualized learning plan. They then work through the semester, and then they culminate the semester with a presentation of learning. And they had board members and district admin at all these students' presentations of learning, because they happened to be on Zoom, of course, right, in December. And it was so interesting. They get feedback, and it was so interesting to hear the feedback from these educators and human development experts, etc., and parents. They were able to pick out all the things that he actually had learned throughout the entire semester. And all because I, as a parent, was able to let go and say, okay, I'm going to honor your true interest. And then this semester, he's taking that, and now he is working with a data scientist at Activision who creates code to find cheaters. And so once he discovered that there's such a job that you can actually track down cheaters in all these video games, he was like, this is the best thing ever. Right? So now he's actually learning C++ and several other programs to basically understand the code that was written, and he's, who knows where it's going to go from there.
That is so incredible, that listening to what his interests are and building, and wouldn't it be wonderful if that's what high school was for everyone? It would be such a good transition from high school to college, because they would already be fully engaged in the planning their schedule and doing the work that that it takes to get to the end of that. But what a great experience. And that's what the new independent learning program at Santa Monica High School is going to be?
Yeah, it is. This the second year. Yeah. So I mean, like, we have another student who, was failing pretty much everything, right? Was disengaged in everything. And she really likes nail art. I have no nails on my, but for her, doing her own nails was something she was really interested in. Who knew that there's an entire industry out there of nail art, right? Including reality shows, very successful ones, entire businesses, and the industries worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so she's doing, I'm running an accelerator workshop right now. And so she's actually looking at new technologies that allow for creating interesting nail art where she's actually inventing something that one could buy at home. And instead of putting on press-ons, you could create something digital and stick your finger in, and then it would just automatically paint your nails.
Right.
I'm telling you, this is amazing stuff. I feel like there's a short film in here somewhere, because these are the stories that we as parents of young people need to hear, since we grew up in that generation of like, what about the standards and all of these benchmarks, where this is going to be transformational for the next generation. And when we look at what's happening right now in the world, like, we need these type of thinkers, these passionate people that have identified what they're interested in and what they're curious about, and then have the time, and we celebrate them in their journey to explore and learn more. Like, I love the story you shared about your son with it. Like, now he's working with a data scientist. Think you see that happening 5 years ago? Like, were you thinking data science might be?
Not even in December. I think, Dejana, I think the you hit upon exactly the thing that's really so important. I think, when I started my educator career, I started with early childhood, and I studied the Reggio Emilia approach from Italy. And one of the big design components of the Reggio Emilia approach is a high image of the child, right? So even at age 2 or 3, that they should be using real hammers and real nails, and not, plastic squeaky ones, and, real paintbrushes and paints, etc., right? So it does so much to their psyche and their development and their self-confidence to do that. And then we basically throw them into elementary school and we say, no, forget that now. Now we don't trust you to do anything on your own, right? Or when you get to this age, you'll be able to do that, but right now you're not going to, right?
I saw Tim struggling to get a question in here.
That's all right.
Women, Tim, it's hard.
That's okay. Hey, Jean, I have a question, because you talked about how your kid got inspired, and knowing that, I know my parents are doing this. What I'm thinking about, though, is the kids that I've worked with as a teacher are mostly in Title I schools. Their parents don't work at Sony. Their parents are not statisticians. Now, you mentioned mentoring earlier. Can you tell us a little more about how do you hook kids up who don't have anyone to look to for, here's an idea I've got in my head, but there just isn't anyone I can find that's doing anything like that. So I guess that's not an option for me.
That's a great question, and that's pretty much the foundation of what I do. Number one, we have to really listen to them as adults, whether we're parents or educators, admin, etc. And I find that actually to not be automatic. We think it should be automatic, right? But we have an advisory structure. And 15 students have one advisor, and they go through 4 years. So you would think that the teacher would know this kid completely, right? But, I have a psychology degree, so I think I have a little bit more tools in my toolbox that help me to draw out some of the interests that the students may not be willing to share. Because then that's the second component of it. They're so used to trying to find the right answers. They are not honest with themselves, right? So going back to my son, initially in 9th grade, when they asked him, what is your interest? He said space and underwater. And I'm like, I've never seen you read a space book or an underwater book. Maybe it was from meeting you, Dr. Jijana, right? Like under robotics. I was like, but I've never seen you watch a documentary. Like, where did this come from, right? But he felt like those were the right answers, that he should not be saying video games, right? And so I had to create a sort of a plan within myself, for questions that I would ask them. Things like, so what is it that you do at home? Usually, what do you do at home when you're not in school? Nothing. So do you stare at a white wall for like 12 hours? No. Of course not. Okay, so then what does your mom yell at you to stop doing? Right? And then they go, oh, yeah, okay. So TikTok, social media, video games, coloring my nails, ripping apart my clothes, all of that comes out. Right. So of course, then now they're starting to feel like, okay, you're safe because I'm telling you what I'm really interested in, and you're encouraging that. And so now I feel like I want to share more with you. Then we in this program, we actually help them to learn research skills, right? Who's doing what I am interested in doing in the world, right? And doing it really well. So we have another student who's, whose parents are never home. He lives in like a studio apartment with like 12 members of his family. He can't get on Zoom because there's no quiet place for him to be able to turn his sound on, right? And he's really interested in design, and he wants to make T-shirts with his own design. He's a doodler, and so when we asked him I asked him, find me 12, share with me 12 designers that you love, that you just think are just kick butt, designers. He was so excited. Now he's like researching, and he's finding articles on them. He posts them as evidence of his work. And then the next step is, okay, let's find their contact information. Right? And then they're always like, oh, they're not going to contact me back. I was like, you don't know until you try. Right? So then we go about crafting, an email, a letter, like how can we make ourselves interested? At the same time, we ask people like Dr. Figueroa to come and share their story. So we have these short 30-minute interviews about like what their life is like. Everybody from video games and Activision to, underwater robotists, and then they are able to do a little exploration there. But it really is a process. It's really about 2 years at least of us adults encouraging the students, like, what is this one interest, right? Oh, okay, let's try that. 6 weeks into it, they can say, oh no, that is not what I thought it was going to be. Right? So I'm going to move to something else. Okay, great. Let's try that. All right. And so it's creating that safe space, teaching them the skills that they're going to need in real life to communicate to people, to reach out to people, to follow up emails, interviews. And then once they really have to make themselves chosen, if you will, to be an intern. Then they'll do these follow days, and so we're teaching them how to market themselves, right? So it's all these different skills happening all at once. But I would say, 99% of the kids who we ask, what are you interested in, will say, oh, no.
That is so true of kids talking to adults about anything, don't you think? Until we can create a space around it that makes it feel safe to talk to us, and like that there's something in it for them to talk to us. It's not just a waste of their time, which I think
I was just reminded with all the tools behind Dr. Figueroa, the one thing I love, I mean, there's so many things I love about making, but one of the amazing things about making is how many amazing conversations have you had with a child while their hands are busy? Right? So they're just like doing their thing, and then all of a sudden they're sharing with you all this like stuff that maybe we're not even supposed to know about what's happening in their homes and stuff, right? And so, I truly believe that is it's a gateway to good things, right? It's a gateway to building that connection.
Awesome.
Oh my goodness. This is so true. Like, it's a gateway. It's just an eye-opening experience when you can create that space and their hands are on something and they're working on something. I see a little bit of the innovation that humanity has when I work with children like that. It's really powerful for all those educators out there. If you haven't experienced integrating, making innovation, and just allowing your students to explore with their hands, especially virtual learning is a great opportunity to do that 100%. I'm throwing it to you, Dr. Leah, because I'm looking at my time and I'm concerned that we might have run out.
We're about out. That's true. And one of the things I wanted to say before we close, when you were talking about like they try something and that's not what I thought it was going to be. It's so wonderful to see that encouraged, and I think it's exposing them to as many possibilities as we can when they're in middle school and high school, where they can actually see the inside of something so they can make informed choices as they move forward. I graduated with a lot of people who chose professions that then they got into, especially friends who went into law and then said, oh, this is not what I thought. And so we're trying to bring them back to education. But yes, I think, Dejana, Dr. Figueroa, we need to say goodbye.
We're wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Well, what can I say, Jean? Thank you so much for joining us today and just enlightening us on your work and inspiring. I'm inspired, so I'm sure my viewers are our viewers are inspired as well to really, innovate, hands-on, make, explore, think outside of the box when it comes to the education of our children. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us as part of the panel. Again, always a joy working with you, Dr. Leah. I'm Dr. Dejana. This was Teachers for Teachers. Thank you for your time, and we can't wait for our next conversation. Please join us next week.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you.